Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to all of the new beautiful smiling faces to my channel. I'll admit this week has been quite the roller coaster, mostly just up, no downs really in terms of my channel. I've gotten so much overwhelming support in the last week. Your comments and encouragement have been really amazing, and I'm honestly speechless. Again, I don't even know what to say besides thank you. I do know what to say about this video though, and that is we're going to try to do something a little bit different, and I would love to know what you guys think after it's all done. So instead of just focusing on one tip or one technique, I actually just want to show you how I captured a photo from start to finish. That includes me actually shooting the photo on location, my composition, talking you through that, my settings in camera, all the way to every part of my editing process, which I'll do live right now. But if that's not stuff you're into, as in you don't really want to watch how I capture the photo, I will have timestamps down below, and you can just start wherever your heart desires. With that said, if you do end up enjoying this video, you can, just tap that like button if you would like to. And if not, that's okay too. Regardless, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get started. All right, so the image we're going to be editing today, I actually captured about a month and a half ago on my San Juan adventure trip to capture the fall colors in Western Colorado. So if you haven't seen that video, that's totally okay. And if you want to watch the full thing, you can right there. But if you haven't, I'm going to just play the part that in regards to this picture. It's about 5 minutes, and I talk about how I captured the photo, why I chose that composition, and everything in between. There's also a little bit of philosophical stuff and, just me babbling on in the moment of taking that shot. So without further ado, enjoy, and I'll see you guys again really soon. It's been a long day. The last time you saw me was pretty early, 10:30, I think, and I was eating. And now it is 6:12. I've just been driving around everywhere, and this place is absolutely incredible. I don't think I've been to such a beautiful place in all of America, and I've been to some pretty beautiful places, and I will say the conditions today have been really bad for photography, which is why this is the next time you're seeing me. I've hopped out of my car at least 40 times to take some photos, and there's just been so much haze. It's the worst haze I think I've ever seen. But to combat that, what I've been trying to do is shoot smaller. Instead of grandiose, big backgrounds where you can see the haze, I've been trying to shoot one tree, just some tree trunks, the road I'm driving on, and I might put up some of the pictures that I got earlier today. I don't know if any of them came out. It's been very tough. There has been very little light, and if there was light, it's this weird, not diffused light, but kind of diffused light. It's not very good. So no telling if I got anything. But here, for sunset, the area I was driving in has cleared up a decent amount right behind me. And there's clouds right behind this mountain, which there was no clouds this morning or yesterday. And this is the clearest I found on the whole road that I've been driving on, so I just stopped here to try to find a composition. And the composition I have found is, you see this dead aspen tree right here. And you can also see this grove of aspens right here. And the idea that I'm going to try to do is contrast the dead aspen with the living aspens. And my setup is 7200 on portrait, right at about 70, and the aspen is directly in the middle of the frame. And what I'll likely do is take about a 4-shot pano and have a very wide shot that gets the whole mountain and have the aspen right in the middle of the frame. I'm not sure it's gonna work. I tried to balance the aspen tree with the dead aspen tree with the living aspen trees, and I just didn't know if it worked or not, and it felt more right to just put it directly in the center of the frame. Right now we're just waiting on the light. The sun is stuck behind some clouds, but it does look promising. It looks much clearer as it sets, and I really think we might get some color on this hillside and these mountains, and I'm super excited. So now it's just a waiting game. Sun is in full swing now, as you can tell on my face. Also, you can tell that I moved the camera a little bit. I actually started shooting with the 𝐒𝐤𝐢𝐚𝐥𝐬 just to get the other composition that I wanted to try, which is the tree, the dead aspen on the left side, and the living trees on the right side to kind of balance the frame. I just couldn't decide if that's what I wanted to shoot on my main camera or not. I didn't know which one was going to work, so I'm just going to shoot both. Sometimes that's how it is. Just being able to shoot with the Fuji means I don't have to change the lenses on my main camera every time I want to try the different comp. So we're still waiting for the perfect light. It's definitely more vibrant now, and I'm going to keep shooting a few photos. We'll probably actually wait, hopefully, until the sun fully sets and we can get some of that red golden light. So yeah, I hope this one turns out. It's pretty cool. I honestly think the weakest part could be the composition that I've chosen, just because there's just not enough of this with the mountain, and there's not enough to balance with this, but it could turn out, so I'm optimistic. For anyone wondering, settings wise, the only out of the ordinary thing is I'm using a polarizer because, like I said, it's been hazy all day, and I will cut out as much haze as I possibly can, even though it's not too bad on the peaks behind me. It's terrible in that direction, but that's basically the only thing I'm using out of the ordinary. ISO 100, f8, shutter speed doesn't matter. I just have it on whatever I need for the exposure, and that's how we've got it set up. So I'm gonna keep taking some photos. Alright, so as luck would have it on this trip so far, the light didn't happen. But that's okay. That's okay. You're not going to get a shot every day. And I took a lot of shots. Maybe something came out. The important thing is I really learned the area. Well, I started to learn the area. I have not learned the area. The area is massive. I only drove on 2 roads, it seems like, and spent all day jumping in and out of the car looking for compositions. And I think that's probably more important than getting a portfolio-worthy shot, just because knowing the area, especially a place you're going to come back to like this, it's really important. The next time I come and I know where to shoot and I know where to camp and I know good compositions, I can get far more photos that time around than maybe this time, right? It also it generally helps to just know an area where it's good, where the light is best, and depending on the time of day. And realistically, man, photography, it changes you. I've been shooting for years, but it's really, I wouldn't be standing here talking to this camera, while talking to you guys, without it. And I cannot thank it enough. I'm pretty sure it's helped me with many of the tough times that I've had in my life. And even the good times, it just makes them better. It makes me drive down the road and look for compositions or leading lines or chaos or, old and new. And I look at the world in a different way, and I can't thank photography enough to see that. And I don't know what I would do without it. So I hope you guys, if you're looking to getting into photography, you should. And if you are into photography, I hope you can relate. If you don't see me again, you'll probably see me tomorrow morning. I do think that there is a possibility that maybe there's a blue hour shot, which I'm still kind of...
Spoiler alert, there was no blue hour shot that night. Hell, there was barely any light to actually take the photo that I wanted, but I did capture at least one that I think worked. Also, you know that feeling of like hearing yourself talk and you're kind of like, is that really what I sound like? Yeah, even after editing and filming myself for this long, it's still, I don't know if I'm ever going to get past that. Especially when I'm watching myself going, all right, Mr. Photography philosopher, let's get the ball rolling here. And yeah, so anyways, with that in mind, let's jump into Lightroom and start editing this photo. All right, so now that we're in Lightroom, I just want to quickly talk about how I choose what photo I'm going to edit and why I choose it. But I really just wanted to show you really quick. This was the first photo I took that night, and you can tell how bad the conditions were before those clouds opened up behind the mountain and we got a little bit of light. Now, this is a special case. Typically, I have a bunch of photos that I have to go through and select which one possibly had the best light or was the sharpest or a combination of both. In this particular case, though, we're actually going to be putting together, like I said in the video, a panorama. And it also just so happens that I only captured one panorama that whole night because I expected the light to change. So I took this shot during some light, but I expected it to get better, and it never did. So I never took another pano shot. So when it comes to which photo I selected and why, this was the only panorama I took. So it just makes sense that that's the one that I end up editing. Now, the other thing to think about is if I took multiple, a lot of the times I just try to choose what the best conditions were. And usually that's pretty easy because the best light doesn't last that long. But if you are having difficulty, just pick the one that looks best to you, select a few of them, and then just go from there. So the first thing we're going to do is select all of our photos that we want in the panorama, right click, go to Photo Merge, Panorama. And if you don't know how to shoot a panorama or photo merge a panorama, you can pretty much follow exactly what I've done in this video, and that should get you into a good spot. So our preview comes up and you'll notice that at the bottom and the top, there's some jagged edges. That's because I'm not shooting on a very level surface and I'm not shooting perfectly, but that's totally okay for two reasons. One, there's not that much white space. And my plan is to crop this, the sky and the bottom of the image, so that part doesn't matter. But the other reason it doesn't matter as much is because we can use the boundary warp tool set to 100 and it'll give us a nice looking panorama. I'm going to turn auto settings off and we're going to hit merge. Well, the other thing is if you care, spherical, cylindrical, and perspective, I'll be honest, it really depends on how I shoot a panorama. I will change these settings depending on how I shoot it. And realistically, the best thing you can do is just play around with those and see which one looks best. So I'm going to hit merge. Also, I'm trying not to focus too much on a very specific thing, otherwise the video will probably end up being too long. So as I'm waiting for this to merge, I just wanted to tell you that if you want a more in-depth tutorial on panoramas, I could do that. And if you want more in-depth tutorials about a lot of the stuff I talk about within this video, I plan on doing that, or I might have already done that. But for this particular video, I kind of just want to tell you what I'm doing, maybe hint at a little bit of tips here and there, but keep it nice and concise. So I'm going to continue waiting for my laptop to create this panorama, and I'll see you in hopefully not 5 minutes. All right, so now that our panorama finished processing, good job, little MacBook Pro, we can talk about the hardest question of this entire process. It is a question I get asked a lot, and it is a question I cannot just directly answer for you guys. All I can do is give you the tools that might be able to help you answer your own questions. And that is, how do I start an edit? What do I know what I should do to a photo? How should I edit a specific photo? And this is a great example, and this is the entire reason I chose this particular photo, is because I think we can edit this photo in multiple ways and have it come out looking good. Sometimes you're gonna have a photo that there's just really, it's cut and dry, pretty straightforward how you're gonna wanna edit it. This photo particularly, if you happen to watch it when I originally shot it and displayed it on my episode about the San Juans, I actually did an edit that was more of a film look, where you can already tell that the colors and the contrast is muted in our original photo. And I just went with that because I really love the tree, the dead tree in the center of the panorama. And the film look, or if I'm thinking about printing it on a wall, I really love that muted, subdued colors and having a slightly faded black in the image. And it just really connects with me in this particular scene just because of how this dead tree is in this kind of Western style shot. However, for this particular edit, this time around, because I haven't done it, I want to try something different. And I also think that this will show you guys more tools or more techniques you can use in your editing. So instead of trying to go for a muted or flat look, we're actually going to try to make this image stand out a little bit more, add a little bit of pop to it, some color and some contrast, and just kind of liven it up some and make it more of a, center of attention rather than off and subdued in the background. So with that said, we're going to try to keep that in mind throughout our whole edit. What is our goal? Our goal is to make this image stand out a little bit more than it does now. And with that in mind, let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is exactly what I talked about last week in my video. We are going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And if you didn't see that video, you can check it out over here. We're just going to boost our blue saturation to 100. And as you can tell, that increased our cloud saturation a little bit too much. So to counteract that, we're going to scroll up to our HSL and decrease by about 20. And this is something we can go back to and change. The next thing I want to do is adjust my white balance. And I'm actually going to do a whole video on white balance because sometimes it's hard to choose what's right and what's wrong. In this particular edit, I kind of want to add a little bit more warmth to the image because if you happen to notice when I shot the shot, it was pretty warm in terms of color cast on the mountains. So let's do that. So instead of so if I set this to auto, it's going to pick 7,500. That's a little bit too much. So I'm going to bring that down to about 6,200-ish. That's good. Now, obviously the foreground is much warmer, but when I look at this tree and I remember that moment of when I shot it, that is close to what the tree looked like. So now that we have our white balance set, I'm going to go in here and adjust my basic settings. So the first thing I notice is I look at my histogram here and I can tell just how flat this image is. And what I mean by flat is that there is basically nothing in the whites over here on the histogram, and even my blacks are pretty non-existent. So the first thing I'm going to do is just brighten up the whole image by bringing up my whites to, that looks good. Now, instead of using exposure to brighten my whole image, I'm using whites just because it will naturally bring up the whole image without brightening all of the shadows and the blacks that are already not dark enough. So with that in mind, let's tone down the blacks just a little bit. Now, basically what I just did is added natural contrast into my image. So you can see the before already and the after is pretty significant. The only other thing I'm going to do is bring up my shadows just a little bit. And I'm thinking that looks pretty good for now. So the next thing I'm going to do is come in here and turn down the clarity to about -15. Now, that's just a personal choice. I really kind of like that look, especially on the aspens in the background here. So if I were to turn that off and on, you can see that they pop just a little bit more, but I really like that kind of paintery feeling, especially in an image that was originally so flat. And it's just been something I've been enjoying doing in my edits. And the next thing we're going to do is use the dehaze slider. Remember, if you happen to watch how I took the shot, that there was still a decent amount of haze. Not that you have to only use this when there is haze, but for this shot, we're going to increase it to about 15. And you want to be gentle with this because it will warp a lot of the colors and contrast in your image. But I think about 15 looks pretty good. Something you'll notice is it will definitely increase the blues in your image. So I'm actually going to go back down here and decrease our blues just a tiny bit more. And I think that's looking pretty good. Now, the next step we're going to do is use some slightly more advanced techniques using some local graduated filter and the radial filter, which are local adjustments. So if you don't know about those, I have a video about radial filters and how you can use those, and the graduated filter works pretty much the same. I'll go through everything right here, and I think you'll be able to understand the concept. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the graduated filter, and I kind of want to just darken the sky just a little bit. So we're going to create our graduated filter. Don't pay any attention to the settings that are already there. And Let's bring that down to make sure we get most of the sky there. Let's reset this. And I'm just going to bring down my highlights just a touch. Maybe that looks pretty good. And I'm also going to decrease my exposure just a tiny bit, but not very much, because I really don't want to affect the mountain. So by using the highlight slider here, if you can tell, it really does not touch the mountain very much at all. It just touches the sky. Something else I'm going to do is just add a tiny bit more of dehaze specifically to the sky. That'll give us a little bit more of contrast just up in the sky, make it look pretty good. And the other thing is I want to balance that blue out just a little bit more. So I'm going to increase our color temperature of, and again, this is only affecting this line and above of the sky. So if I turn that off and on, you can see that the blue is just getting a little bit warmer there. And I think that looks pretty good. And so I'm going to add one more G&D, graduated neutral density filter, to the foreground here. And this is because I really just kind of think that the foreground is catching our eye just a little bit too much, and I really want to focus on the tree. So I'm going to reset these. When I made that new G&D, it captured or reused the settings from the one I just made. So I don't want those settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken my exposure by a pretty significant amount. And then I'm also going to bring the shadows down, because most of the information there is shadows, but I kind of like those little highlights on the bushes there. And the only other thing I'm going to do is decrease the clarity, and that is to give a slight sense of it being a little bit blurrier. It's not going to do a whole lot, but it just adds a little hint, especially if you were to print this large. So I think that looks pretty good. So we can look at our before and after right now, and we've come a long way so far. So those are the two graduated neutral density filters I'm going to do. And if you can tell, the whole point of that was we darken the sky a little bit, we darken the foreground a little bit, and that's to kind of bring your eye right into the middle of the frame. So to keep that going, next we are going to go into the radial filters, and I'm going to use a technique that I did in another video or another article that I'll link down below in F-stoppers. And we're basically going to be painting with light with radial filters. So this is an easy way to highlight some areas in your photo, specifically just in Lightroom, rather than having to open them up in Photoshop. So it's pretty simple to understand. I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a radial filter right here on these aspen trees. We are going to hit the invert button. What that'll do is make it where we are only affecting inside the radial filter. So now if I hover over this, the red part will just be within the radial filter. And what I want to do here is increase my exposure by a very slight amount, because the majority of our brightening is going to come from boosting the whites. The reason I'm doing this, and I'll show you really quick, is, let me reset the whites. If I increase my exposure here, it looks fake, right? So you can see the areas here in the mountains and here in the foreground. It's not going to look correct once you're done. But if I only increase the whites, it's really going to focus on those aspens that already have a little bit of light on them. The other thing I want to do is come down here and add a little bit more feather. And let's change this just a little bit more. And I'm going to bring this exposure back up like I had, probably to 0.1. And I think that's looking pretty good. We can hone this in just a little bit more. And I want to make sure I get this whole section of aspens. And then once I have that dialed in, I'm going to just right click and duplicate it. And then we're going to take one and put it over here. So I'm just going to readjust for this aspen grove. And you can tell that this one had a little bit less light on it. So I'm just going to nudge it just a tiny bit, not much. Let's just do 0.13. And again, I'm just going to duplicate this one again. I'm going to come over here. We're going to make it for just this little aspen section, and then we're going to do it one more time for the section up here. And again, you want to be subtle with these things. You need to make sure that you're not making it obvious that they're there. And I can show you the before and after of this one. So let's delete that, and then let's undo it. And you can see that It's really just highlighting those aspen areas, and it's doing a pretty good job in not making anything else look like it's just that filter. So now we're going to add one more radial filter, but it's not going to be to highlight an area. It's actually going to be to darken the rest of the photo. So I'm going to make a big radial filter, put it right here on the tree, because again, our whole purpose is to highlight the tree, have our eyes drawn to the tree. So what I'm going to do here is make sure that it's not inverted, because our goal here is to affect the rest of the image. I'm going to add a big feather. That'll help us make it look more realistic. I'm going to bring the exposure down by a decent amount. And then I'm also going to bring down the shadows just a little bit, so that keeps those highlights on those aspens over there. And I think this may have been just a little bit too strong. Let's put it about right there. Let's widen it just a little bit. Now I'm going to delete that and show you what it's doing. And it's really just having us focus in right here on our dead tree. That's looking pretty good to me. The other thing you'll notice is it's not obvious, right? So it doesn't look like that aspen tree is glowing or translucent or way brighter than everything else. And I actually think we're at a pretty good place in our photo. I do think since we darkened the rest of the image, we need to come back to our adjustments here, and we're just going to increase our whites even more to brighten up the photo a little bit. Maybe decrease our highlights just a tad. And I think we're going to increase the overall exposure by just a little bit to kind of brighten it up. And I think this is looking pretty good. Let's look at the before and after. This is our before, and this is our after. Now, the final thing I'm going to do is my saturation. I think it's a little bit oversaturated since we added a bunch of stuff to it. And I'm also going to add a medium contrast curve. Oh yeah, that's looking really good. But there's definitely, it's a little bit too saturated. So I'm going to bring down the saturation by about 10. It's hard to do. And I think we are close. I think the blues are still just a little bit too strong from everything that we've done. So adjust that. And the last thing I'm going to do is make sure all of my lens correction stuff is on. Now this is up to you. I think removing chromatic aberration is the standard, but in terms of profile correction for your lens, sometimes I don't turn this on for like my wide angle lens because I like its natural vignette, but typically I do turn it on. And so with that done, my last step is always to finish off the sharpening. I usually pick between 70 and 80. I'm going to hold down Command or Alt, Option or Alt on a PC while I hold this mask, because I don't want everything sharpened. And I think that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to go back in here and brighten this section up a little bit by just bringing up the shadows just a touch. And I think that's about it. So there's our edit. And the next hardest part comes with our crop. The final thing I'm going to do to this image is how do I want to crop it? And if you happen to watch how I took the photo, one of the things I didn't really know what was going to look best was how my composition was, with the tree dead in the center, with it balanced with the aspens. The good news is we can do both. So I'm going to do my pano crop here. Go into the crop tool, just slightly adjust here. And the biggest thing is I want that tree right in the middle. And you'll notice the tree is kind of leaning from right to left, just ever so slightly. So I'm trying to pay attention to this marker and find the right balance for it. And I think it's about there. So that is our edit and that is our crop. I think that looks really great. So here's our before and here is our after. Now the other crop that I can do that I talked about before was balancing the tree in the frame with the living aspens in the background. And that's not exactly where I want it. About there looks good. And that's that crop. Now, I would love to hear what you guys think. Which one do you like better? The pano with the tree right in the middle, or the crop with the tree on the left-hand side and the living aspens on the right-hand side? All right, so let's go back, and I'm gonna give you even another option, is that if I convert this to black and white, and I come down here, and I turn my blues down just a little bit, I end up with not a half bad looking black and white image. Again, I would love to know what you guys think down below, which one you prefer, but that's the whole edit. That was everything. You watched me take the photo, why I took the photo, why I chose the photo that I did, and exactly how I would edit it in multiple different ways. All right, so I know that was quite a lot to take in, but if you need to go back and just watch some stuff over again, slow it down, rewatch certain parts, anything like that, obviously you can feel free. I really hope that maybe you saw something that you knew how to use, just you didn't know to use it in that way. Or maybe you knew every technique I did and it was just interesting to see my thought process. The reality is, when it comes to photography, there is no right or wrong answer for a lot of things. There are techniques and stuff you can follow that generally make a better photo, but it'll really come down to you reviewing your photos, editing your photos, and finding what you think looks best. In this particular photo, and this is exactly why I chose it, it is not straightforward. There is not a cut and dry, this composition works. And to this day, I still don't know what works. Personally, I think I like the tree directly in the center of the panorama. When I think about it being printed on a wall, which is usually my in-game thought about a lot of photos, that's what I would prefer to see. However, if your in-game photo is posting to Instagram or trying to gain following or just trying to get, recognition, that might not be what you want to go for. So it's all up to you. And I know that's an answer that's pretty vague, but it will come in time that you will just find, I like the way this looks. And a lot of the times, the best thing I can recommend is just take a break from the photo that you're working on. Finish it, and then just take a day or two, and then come back to it. And if you still love the photo, that probably means you like your edit. But if you come back and you say, it's still not as good as it could be, or it's oversaturated, or you just don't like it, then maybe it just needs to be shelved and you approach it again later. I personally, today, worked on a photo that's over 2 years old that I still can't decide if I like the composition or I like my editing in it. It's something I still struggle with. So it's something that, you will learn over time, but I also think it's just something that every photographer, no matter what level they're at, doesn't have a direct answer for. And with that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope being able to see how I took a photo, my whole thought process behind editing the photo, and why I chose what I chose was insightful. And again, if you like this kind of content, if you like seeing how I captured it all the way to how I edited it, please let me know, because it does take more time and they are longer videos, and I just want to make stuff that connects with you guys. It's also really fun to see, how I captured something in the field all the way to the last step of exporting the photo. So if you want to see those photos, I'm going to put them up on the screen right after this. But before that, I just want to say thank you for watching, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all of your support over the past week. It's been incredible, and I thank you guys for joining me. Until next time, see you soon.